Overthinking rarely looks dramatic. It does not shout. It circles. In A Prince, Machiavelli observed that hesitation weakens rulers more than enemies do. Indecision fractures authority from within. Stress often begins not from danger, but from divided control. This is not a story about silencing thought. It is about reclaiming inner authority. A thought returns, then returns again, not because it is urgent, but because it feels unfinished. The mind scans for threats that have not yet arrived, replays conversations that are already over, measures outcomes that cannot be controlled. About understanding how the mind regains stability when it stops trying to control what it cannot command. Subscribe. Machiavelli understood that instability rarely enters from outside first. Overthinking does not begin as chaos. It begins as caution. What something goes wrong? The mind answers, then questions the answer, then questions again. Soon, the original issue is no longer the center. The repetition is. In The Prince, Machiavelli warned that a ruler who hesitates too long weakens himself before any enemy arrives. The threat becomes internal. Overthinking follows this pattern. The mind begins to govern itself with suspicion. Every choice is re-examined. Every possibility is replayed. It feels like responsibility. It feels intelligent. It feels careful. But something shifts quietly. Energy drains. Focus fragments. Clarity dissolves. Instead of directing thought, the person reacts to it. This is the moment recognition begins. Stress is not always loud. It is often repetitive. The same scenarios loop at night. The same conversations replay during silence. The body tightens without visible cause. The nervous system interprets uncertainty as unfinished danger. So it scans again. Machiavelli believed authority requires decisiveness. When command is absent, instability grows. Overthinking is a mind without settled command. Not weak, but divided. Part of it seeks control. Another part fears error. And between those parts, noise forms. Recognition does not condemn this state. It observes it. The mind is not broken. It is attempting protection. But protection without direction becomes exhaustion. The first awareness is simple. The noise is not the problem. The lack of inner authority is. And until authority returns, the mind will continue circling what it does not control. Beneath overthinking, there is rarely confusion. There is fear. The fear of choosing wrong. The fear of missing something unseen. The fear of losing control over what might happen next. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He wrote that rulers who fear losing power often overcompensate, watching, calculating, anticipating betrayal even when none is present. The anticipation itself becomes destabilizing. The mind behaves similarly. When outcomes feel uncertain, thought increases. The brain attempts to predict every possible future. If every scenario is considered, perhaps nothing will surprise. But the attempt to control the future expands it endlessly. The more possibilities imagined, the more threats appear. Psychologically, uncertainty activates vigilance. The nervous system prefers known pain over unknown risk. So it searches. Overthinking becomes a shield. If every mistake is rehearsed mentally, maybe it can be avoided. If every conversation is analyzed, maybe rejection can be prevented. If every plan is revised repeatedly, maybe failure can be eliminated. But life does not offer total certainty. Machiavelli warned that excessive caution can weaken authority more than boldness. A leader who fears every risk loses momentum. The same applies inwardly. When the mind refuses to tolerate uncertainty, it multiplies it. Fear disguises itself as preparation. But preparation without action becomes paralysis. The root of overthinking is not lack of intelligence. It is a lack of safety. Safety feels absent when control feels fragile. The mind tightens its grip. It calculates more. It revisits what cannot be changed. And in doing so, it forgets a quiet truth. Control was never absolute. It was always partial. And fear grows when the mind demands certainty from a world that cannot provide it. The mind does not repeat thoughts randomly. It repeats what feels unresolved. Psychologically, when an experience carries uncertainty or perceived threat, the brain marks it as incomplete. Incomplete experiences demand review, an outcome still unknown. The brain replays the moments not to punish, but to protect. Machiavelli observed something similar in political power, a conversation that ended ambiguously, a decision made without certainty. In The Prince, Machiavelli warned that instability persists when threats are not resolved decisively. Half measures create lingering tension. Unfinished matters invite repeated conflict. The mind follows the same rule. When a situation feels unresolved, thought continues. The stress response activates. Cortisol rises subtly. Attention narrows. The body prepares for correction. But here lies the paradox. Many of the things the mind replays cannot be corrected. The past cannot be revised. The future cannot be fully predicted. So the loop continues. Rumination feels active. It feels like effort. But physiologically, it exhausts. Sleep lightens. Muscles tighten. Breathing shortens. The nervous system remains slightly on alert. Machiavelli believed that decisive action ends instability. Not perfect action, decisive action. The brain seeks the same signal. Closure. When no internal decision is made. When responsibility remains suspended. The loop remains open. Overthinking is often the mind asking for resolution. Not endless analysis, but an internal declaration that says, "This is enough." Until that declaration is made, the nervous system continues scanning. And scanning, without limit, becomes stress. At the center of overthinking lies a quiet illusion. The belief that if every variable is examined, nothing will go wrong. This illusion feels rational. But Machiavelli understood something different. He wrote that fortune governs half of human affairs. No ruler, no matter how strategic, commands everything. Control is never absolute. The stress begins when the mind forgets this. Overthinking grows from the refusal to accept uncertainty. The internal voice insists, think more, analyze further, prepare again. Yet the world does not shrink into predictability. It remains unpredictable. Psychologically, the need for total control is linked to anxiety. The brain attempts to reduce ambiguity because ambiguity feels unsafe. But the attempt to eliminate uncertainty often amplifies it. The more control is demanded, the more chaos is perceived. Machiavelli distinguished between prudence and obsession. A wise leader prepares where preparation is possible and accepts what lies beyond command. Overthinking confuses these two realms. It tries to command what belongs to fortune. It tries to calculate human emotion. It tries to script outcomes in a world of variables. And when certainty fails to appear, stress deepens. The illusion promises safety, but it delivers tension. The mind tightens its grip. The body mirrors it. Control, in its healthy form, stabilizes. In its exaggerated form, it suffocates. Recognizing this illusion is not surrender. It is clear. Not everything can be managed. Not every risk can be neutralized. Machiavelli did not teach passivity. He taught realism. Authority strengthens when it understands its limits. And sometimes, stress reduces not by thinking more, but by releasing what was never controllable. There comes a moment when the mind grows tired of its own weight. Not in exhaustion, not in defeat, but in quiet awareness. In this stillness, something begins to shift. The realization emerges that not every thought deserves belief. Machiavelli understood this subtle power. He observed that restraint often holds greater authority than force, that those who remain inwardly steady become untouchable, while those who chase control become trapped by it. Here, the mind begins to loosen its grip. The constant scanning of the future slowly fades. The rehearsal of pain loses its urgency. The nervous system, long trained to anticipate danger, begins to sense safety again. Stress does not disappear, but its dominance weakens, because stress feeds on urgency, and urgency dissolves when time is no longer treated as an enemy. This turning point is not dramatic. It does not arrive with clarity or solutions. It arrives with acceptance. The acceptance that uncertainty is not failure, that unpredictability is not a weakness, that silence is not emptiness. In this awareness, the mind stops demanding control from a world that cannot promise certainty. Instead, It begins to trust the unfolding of events. Thoughts continue to arise, but they no longer command. They no longer define. They pass, like clouds across an open sky. And within this space, emotional balance slowly returns. Not through effort, but through release. Machiavelli's philosophy transforms here, from strategy to sovereignty, from dominance to composure, from control to calm precision. The true turning point is not changing the world. It is changing the relationship with one's own mind. And in that shift, stress loosens its grip, silence becomes safe, and peace, once distant, quietly draws near. A gentle remembering of a state that existed long before worry learned its language, before the mind discovered fear. In this return, there is no struggle, no effort to silence the mind. The body begins to exhale what it has carried for too long. The shoulders are lower. The breath deepens. Here, healing unfolds without force. Machiavelli wrote of balance, of knowing when to act and when to withdraw, of understanding that strength is preserved through moderation, not excess. In the same way, the nervous system restores itself through gentleness, not control. Stillness becomes a refuge, not an escape from life, but a return to it. Thoughts continue to rise, but they no longer dominate. They drift like leaves across water, present, yet ungrasped. The mind learns to observe rather than engage, to witness rather than interfere. In this observation, emotional tension loosens. The grip of anticipation softens. The constant rehearsal of worst-case futures loses its urgency. Stress fades into the background, no longer demanding attention. Not erased, but integrated. Here, calm becomes a steady presence rather than a fleeting state, a quiet undercurrent beneath daily movement. This calm is not passive. It is alert, responsive, alive. Machiavelli understood that clarity arises when emotion no longer clouds perception. When one sees events as they are, not as fear imagines them. Stillness grants this clarity. Within it, perception sharpens. Reactions slow. Choices become deliberate. And in this slowing, something remarkable happens. Life regains texture. Moments stretch. Simple sensations return to awareness. The warmth of sunlight, the weight of breath, the rhythm of walking. These small perceptions anchor the mind in the present, and presence dissolves anxiety's hold. Healing, then, is not transformation. It is returning, a return to simplicity, a return to softness, a return to trust. In this stillness, the mind no longer seeks certainty. It learns to live peacefully inside uncertainty, and that is where true balance resides. In the end, nothing dramatic remains. No grand realization, no final victory, only quiet, a quiet that settles gently into the spaces once filled with worry, a silence that no longer feels empty, but full of breath, full of presence, full of life as it is. Machiavelli understood that all power fades, all control dissolves, every structure, no matter how strong, eventually returns to dust, and in that knowing, there is humility. Peace is born not from dominance, but from acceptance, from understanding that nothing must be conquered for life to unfold. The thoughts that once demanded attention now pass softly, like distant echoes, felt but not followed, seen but not believed. Stress loosens completely, not because the world becomes gentle, but because the mind becomes spacious. In this spaciousness, emotional wounds soften, memories lose their sharp edges. The future releases its grip. What remains is presence, a presence that does not seek meaning, yet finds it everywhere. In the mornings, on quiet nights, in the gentle rhythm of breath. This is the quiet ending Machiavelli hinted at, the wisdom of knowing when to withdraw, not from life, but from unnecessary struggle, because true strength does not shout. It does not rush. It does not demand. It endures. And so the journey closes where it always began, in stillness, in awareness, in calm acceptance, not as an escape, but at home. Here, overthinking dissolves into silence. Stress softens into understanding, and the mind finally learns the art of resting. In this rest, life is no longer resisted. It is simply lived, quietly, fully, Now, write your feelings after watching this video's philosophy in the comments and subscribe.